Morning, everyone right to go? Thanks for joining us. There are 1,890 new cases since yesterday. We currently have 18,342 active cases across Victoria. I'm sad to have to confirm that 5 people have died with COVID-19. A male in his 50s from Melbourne, a male in his 50s from Brimbank, 2 men in their 70s, one from Maribyrnong and one from Wyndham, and a woman in her 80s from Yarra. This will be an incredibly difficult time for their families and friends, so we extend our deepest sympathies and our best wishes to each of them. 609 people are currently in hospital with COVID-19. 126 of those are in ICU and 88 are on a ventilator. Of the people in hospital yesterday, less than 7%, were fully vaccinated. Again, if you are vaccinated, you are protected. Those you love are protected if they're vaccinated as well. And your chances of finishing up in hospital gravely ill are but a fraction, a tiny fraction of what an unvaccinated person's risks are. And of course, that will change and become even more stark as we open up. When we get to 70% double dose, and we're on track to get there, and we may even get there a little bit earlier than the 26th. And then as we hit 80% double dose and we really do open up, lots of movement, the virus will spread, particularly among those who are not vaccinated. And if you're one of those unvaccinated people, then you are at a much, much greater risk. I'm not pleased to have to say this, but it's just the science of it. It's the data, it's the facts of it. You're at a much higher risk of finishing up getting this. And with Delta, we know that if you get it, then there's every chance that you may finish up unwell, even if you're otherwise healthy, even if you're otherwise fit and don't have other health conditions. So for all those reasons and so many more, it's really important that people get vaccinated and get vaccinated as soon as possible. To that end, there were 39,861 doses of vaccine administered through our state-run centres yesterday. That's a really big effort for a Saturday, almost 40,000 people. Plus, of course, there'll be tens of thousands more at our GP clinics and, of course, trusted community pharmacies, hundreds of them right across the state. So yesterday, I'm sure, given what we did in state hubs, will have been a record-setting day when you added all of those vaccinations together. The majority of those, speaking again for ours, the ones in state hubs, so around 40,000, the majority of those were second dose. That's to be expected with the bring forward of the intervals, as well as the fact that we're getting to a very, very high first dose rate. It just logic tells you that we now move much more towards second doses, and that's what we want, because we're now in a race to get to 70% double dosed as soon as we can, so that the lockdown can end, the curfew can end, and we can begin to implement the really big and important pieces of our roadmap to deliver the national plan. The majority, as I said, of those were second doses. We do expect our double jab rate to accelerate and our first jab rate to slow, as I've just explained. We are encouraging people to bring forward their second dose. There are appointments available just in my own household, just through the normal booking system. Joe and Grace both brought forward their second dose appointments, went down to Sandown and had their second doses in this week, just ending now, I think Wednesday, Thursday. And I think Noah did his similarly just a week or so before then. So there are appointments available through the state booking system. If you can't get an appointment there, then there are absolutely appointments available through pharmacy, and there are appointments available through GPs as well. There's a lot of supply across all 3 of the trusted, approved, safe and effective vaccines, and I'd encourage everybody to go and do that for themselves, for the people they love, and for all of us, because it really is the key to us getting open and getting open fast. I can confirm that we've now gone over the 86% single dose mark, and that's for 16 plus, and over the 58% second dose mark. So we are well on track to get to 70% double dosed on time, as the roadmap outlines, 80% double dose just a short time thereafter. And if you look at the number of first doses we've administered, and the fact that the vast majority, in fact all but a handful of people come back for their second dose, we'll go beyond the 80% barrier as well, which is terrific, because every person who's vaccinated is one less person at higher risk of finishing up in hospital. We only have a couple of weeks to go. We've only got a couple of weeks before we'll be able to get to that 70% mark, and before we'll be able to really begin the process of opening up in earnest with greater freedom. And by the time we get to 80%, only a few days after that, that's when we can really get back to something that looks and feels and is much like normal. We'll then take further steady steps along the way after that. But getting vaccinated, either first dose or bringing your second dose appointment forward, or just turning up for your second dose appointment between now and whenever it falls due, is critically important. These milestones are important, 70 and 80, but every person who gets vaccinated is important to us. First dose, second dose, and then of course, once we get to next year, we assume, subject to announcements from the Commonwealth Government, we'll then move into booster shots for those people who need them. Now, just before I hand to Ministers Pakula and Pearson, who've kindly joined us, and I want to thank them at the outset for the enormous amount of work that they've done to make these announcements possible today, I have good news in relation to our vaccinated economy trials. You would be aware that we had said we wanted to begin from tomorrow 15 vaccinated economy trials in regional Victoria, which is much more open than Melbourne, and then we would follow that once we got to 70%, we'd follow that with some metropolitan Melbourne trials once Melbourne is out of the lockdown that we're in now. So I can confirm those 15 venues in 6 local government areas will operate with higher capacity and higher density limits than would otherwise be the case. They include things like a midweek race meeting at Warrnambool, all the way through to pubs and cafes, real estate agents. Martin's going to speak in a little more detail about what those 15 events and venues look like. But I want to thank in advance those businesses, those local communities, those professional associations, local government, everybody, people at the department, everybody who's worked with us to get those venues ready. That begins from tomorrow. I think you've got a list of those. That's a really important step forward. Now, we have said that Melbourne will follow, and there are a number of headline, if you like, trials that I think will be of great interest to Victorians and really are not only significant events in and of themselves, but they are a really important signal about what the next few months holds for all of us. And that is, we're going to normalise this virus, we're going to move through this difficult gateway, we're going to open up, and we're going to be back doing what we do best. And that's big events and all the things that absolutely define us. The food and wine, major events, all of those things are critical to our identity, whether it's live music or horse racing and everything in between. These are the sorts of things that are critical to our identity, to thousands and indeed tens of thousands of jobs, and they're a very important part of us opening up. So I'm very pleased to be able to confirm that there will be a live music event on Saturday the 30th of October at Sydney Myer Music Bowl. I can't provide a precise number of patrons that will be allowed because there's just a bit more COVID safe planning to be done there. But that, as part of these metro vaccinated economy trials, there will be several thousand people that, if double vaxxed, will be able to attend that live music event. That's incredibly important for them. It's incredibly important for the live music scene. We are the live music capital of our nation. They've done it very, very tough. We've been there to support them all the way through, but they want to get out and perform. They want to do what they do best, and that's to entertain and inspire, to question all of us, to be that incredibly soulful part of our city and state. So that's the 30th of October. Just a few days later, on the 2nd of November, 10,000 fans will be allowed to attend the Melbourne Cup under a whole range of zoning requirements, a very, very detailed COVID safe plan that the VRC have put forward, and Racing Victoria as well. And indeed, the final 2 days of the Cup Carnival will be the Melbourne Cup crowd is a guaranteed crowd. It's part of the trial. We would hope we have then, by that stage, passed 80% double dose, and we can, at that point, confirm that the last 2 events of the carnival, the Melbourne Cup Carnival, Oaks Day and Stakes Day, will also have crowds of up to 10,000 people with the same COVID safe, predominantly outdoors, zoned into, I think, 5 different areas. But this is all about those sorts of events being back, us as a state, an economy and a community being open, and us having done everything we can in our fight against this virus, having stuck together, having looked out for each other, having got vaccinated. That's the most important part. These are just a few announcements today. There will be many more in terms of other metropolitan Melbourne trials. But whether you're a race goer or not, whether you're a fan of that sport or not, that'll be a really important day for every single Victorian, I think, and send a message to the rest of the country and indeed the world about the fact that we are open. More opening to do still beyond that, but that our roadmap is absolutely our way through this, and that the roadmap is predicated and based and dependent on people getting vaccinated. Please go to the website. There are thousands of appointments available for the next seven days, both first dose and second dose, plus there's your GP, plus there's your community pharmacist. It's only a couple of weeks to go. I'm so proud of everything that Victorians have done, everything that Victorians have given. It is humbling to watch and see just how so many acts of kindness, people looking out for each other, people understanding that we are all in this together and that we'll get through it together. But getting vaccinated is absolutely the key. So I would encourage people, and the numbers are terrific. The numbers are growing every single day. To have almost 40,000 jabs administered in state hubs alone yesterday is a very big Saturday, and it's a credit to all of those who are doing that vaccinating work, and of course, none more so than those who are making appointments and turning up. It is our way out. And these are just some, very significant, but some announcements, and there'll be many more as we fill this out with many more metropolitan Melbourne trials. But given the size and the significance of these events, both live music at the Bowl for thousands of people, and Melbourne Cup and the Carnival really, other than Derby Day, with tens of thousands of people, that's what Melbourne and Victoria is all about, and it's proof positive that getting vaccinated means we can open up, and indeed we will. I'm now going to ask Martin to speak to the trials and how that's all going to work for regional Victoria and some of the racing, and then Danny can speak to some of the tech. He and Victor Dominello up in the New South Wales government, and I think Stuart Robert in the Commonwealth government have been working very closely together. We want to make this as seamless as possible. We want to make it as efficient as it possibly can be, and I'm very grateful for the amount of work that Danny and Martin have done to get us to this point, and all that they'll have to do in the weeks and months ahead as we continue to add to these trial sites and indeed transition to a fully vaccinated economy, not just in a handful of settings, but indeed in many thousands of settings right across our state. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Premier. Look, as the Premier's indicated, vaccination is the way that we can reclaim all of the things that we love to do in life, whether it's going out for a meal with our family or going to a great event or going to the cinema with our friends. And that includes celebrating Cup Week at Flemington or indeed a concert at the Bowl. And we are getting much closer to being a vaccinated economy. And the trials that Danny and I are here to talk about are really about ensuring that businesses and individuals are supported as we progressively reopen. So as the Premier indicated, there will be up to 10,000 fans at Flemington on Cup Day on November 2, just 23 days away. We think we're every chance of being at 80% by Cup Day, but if not, the fact that we can run that as a vaccinated economy trial is a very important thing. And as the Premier also indicated, just 3 days before that, music lovers will be able to attend a concert at the Sydney Myer Music Bowl. There'll be gigs at regional pubs that will also happen to safely relaunch our live music scene. And those trials are about testing the settings that we'll have at 80% double vaccination, and that's a threshold that we're going to hit sometime in that first week of November. It also means that the final 2 days of the Carnival, Oaks Day on November 4 and Stakes Day on November 6, will also have 10,000 on course if the 80% thresholds have been met by those dates, and we expect that we have every chance of doing that. The racing fans will be spread across 5 different zones. There'll be allocated seats where food and drink can be served. they'll be required to wear masks, and they'll be fully vaccinated unless they have a valid exemption. So that vaccination status really does mean that more people can safely attend venues and events. It helps to benefit those businesses, but it benefits the economy and our society more generally. So those 80% trials will follow on from the 70% trials that we're starting to conduct in regional Victoria from Monday, across 6 local government areas where we're going to trial the technology in cinemas, at a cafe, at a gym, at a church, at a beauty clinic, at a real estate agent, and at the Warrnambool races next Thursday. So in Bass Coast Shire, the trial will be conducted at the North Pier Hotel at Cowes and the Churchill Island Cafe, in Buloke at the Terminus Hotel in Witchyproof, in East Gippsland at the East Gippsland Art Gallery and the Lake Squash and Movie Theatre in Lakes Entrance. The East Gippsland Art Gallery is in Bairnsdale, I should have mentioned. In Greater Bendigo at the Anglican Church of Australia, Flora Hill, at the Bendigo Art Gallery, at Village Cinemas in Bendigo, and at Body Fit Training in Bendigo. In the Pyrenees Shire at the Avoca Hotel, and in the city of Warrnambool at Darlings of Beauty, at Roberts One Real Estate, at the Warrnambool Art Gallery, and at a race meeting conducted by the Warrnambool Racing Club next Thursday. So those trials will confirm the best processes for establishing vaccination status. They'll help us to identify the training needs of staff, the best support that we can provide for business owners, and how we best communicate those vaccination requirements. The easiest way, of course, to establish vaccination status will be for people to add their vaccine certificate to the Service Victoria app through MyGov or the Express Medicare Plus app, but I will hand over to our technical expert, Minister Pearson, to explain those requirements and those that technical information in greater detail.
Well, thank you, Marty. So, look, we're making sure we have the best technology in place to support Victorians as we move closer to our vaccination targets, opening up our state and getting our world-famous creative and cultural events up and running, just like the concert at the Bowl. So the trials launching tomorrow will allow us to test our systems so we can make sure our reopening is as smooth and as easy as possible. And what we're trying to create here is to have a really positive user experience by incorporating your immunisation certificate into your Service Victoria app, so that from a business perspective or an events perspective, you can QR code in, check in, and show that you've been vaccinated all in the one location. From tomorrow, fully vaccinated Victorians will be able to get ready to share their Commonwealth-supplied COVID-19 digital certificate to the updated Service Victoria app via the Express Plus Medicare app or through the MyGov website. Instructions on how to share the Commonwealth-supplied COVID-19 digital certificate to the Service Victoria app will be made available on the Service Victoria website and at coronavirus.vic.gov.au when the new version of the app is available tomorrow. So I'd like to stress that you'll need the updated version of the app, and you cannot start this journey from your camera if you've been checking in that way. So when we open up, Victorians will be able to check into a venue or event and show their proof of vaccination at the same time by sharing their COVID-19 digital certificate to the Service Victoria app. The check-in confirmation screen will show a green tick plus the person's name and the word valid certificate. Victorians visiting the businesses and events participating in the Vaccinated Economy trial will be the first to use the updated Service Victoria app to check in and show proof of vaccination, and we stand ready to help businesses through this period because we know it won't be an easy journey for everyone. So you'll be able to add your COVID-19 digital certificate to the Service Victoria app from either the Express Plus Medicare app or using the MyGov website. And we encourage people to get a MyGov account if they haven't already got one, and link it to their Medicare online account so they're ready. The Services Australia website has information about how to do this. And this is how you'll share your COVID-19 digital certificate to the Service Victoria app when the app update is available. For those who are not eligible for Medicare, you can access your immunisation history statement through your individual health identifier at MyGov, and you can get an individual health identifier through MyGov if you don't already have one. Alternatively, if you don't have access to technology, you can call the Australian Immunisation Register on 1800 653 809. I'll say that again. So it's 1800 653 809, and ask them to send your statement in the post. Anyone who is exempt from vaccination, as determined by ATAGI clinical guidance, must show evidence of this medical exemption to venues they attend, such as a medical certificate or a letter from an authorised medical practitioner. The Service Victoria app was built following privacy by design and security by design, and that means it includes features to prevent fraud and security threats. COVID-19 digital certificates can only be added to the app via the Express Plus Medicare app or the MyGov website. So you can't sort of take a screenshot of your certificate and upload it into your Service Victoria app. We're making it quite secure. And only one certificate can be downloaded to each Service Victoria app. However, work is already underway to look at ways to add your dependent certificates in the future. And that's consistent with what we've done throughout this pandemic, right? We've been able to have the kiosk function, we've been able to have the add another function. This will be our natural extension of the work that we're doing. So once a certificate is added to the Service Victoria app, there's a green stripe with a tick, which lets you know there's a valid vaccination certificate. So you know this screen is legitimate. Coloured holograms that move can be seen on the check-in screens, so venues will know it's real, making it much harder to fake a check-in screen. You can also see the full certificate stored in the Service Victoria app, and to know it's real, you'll see a hologram of the Australian coat of arms on the COVID-19 digital certificate. Businesses concerned about the validity of a COVID-19 digital certificate may also choose to check it against a valid proof of ID, to make sure the name of the certificate matches with the person trying to enter. For those concerned about privacy, I stress that the Victorian Government does not have access to any medical data linked to a person's Medicare account. Now, getting vaccinated is our way out of this pandemic, and this technology is going to play a vital role in the state's reopening. As the Premier's indicated, we all want to get back to the way life was before this pandemic started. The technology that we are using here today will enable that to occur quickly, efficiently and effectively. And we've been very focused on making sure that we get the very best user experience for Victorians, and we want to provide as much certainty to business and organisations in relation to checking off someone's status as being fully vaccinated. So I might leave my comments there, and I think I'll throw to Jerome now, who's got a bit of an update.
Thanks, Minister, and good morning. So 1,890 cases of COVID in the last 24 hours. That makes 18,342 active cases of COVID in our community at this point in time. Just over a quarter of those new cases were under the age of 20, and over 2/3 were under the age of 40. And we continue to see COVID really targeting those who are unvaccinated and those who are young and active. Half of today's cases are across 6 local government areas, ones that we've all become very familiar with: Brimbank, Casey, Hume, Melton, Whittlesea and Wyndham. And worth noting that we've seen that shift that we've been talking about over the last 10 days towards the southeast, with Casey now with 164 cases, the most cases we have in the southeast. And really I'd use this to say with only 50% of those cases in those 6 LGA areas, it means there's a lot of cases across other parts of Melbourne and regional Victoria. One encouraging sign is that the Hume LGA, we're seeing a slightly lower number of cases today, 188 cases today. So we're seeing a definite cooling off in the case growth rate in Hume, which is a very welcome step forward. And really, I would just stress again, please don't rely now on these on these case narratives that says it's all in a few locations. It is increasingly now coming into suburbs all across Melbourne and all across regional Victoria. 126 cases now across regional Victoria. Again, that's a significant continual growth. As overall case numbers grow, we're seeing ongoing growth in case numbers across regional Victoria. The most significant cases in regional Victoria include 16 in Shepparton. Half of those are well understood and well linked. The other half are under investigation. We have 12 cases in Geelong. 7 of those are linked, 4 of those under investigation. We have 12 cases in the Macedon Ranges, all linked to a number of known households. 11 cases in Latrobe as part of our ongoing exposure in that community, and 18 cases in Baw Baw Shire associated with the Robin Hood Hotel and a number of other gatherings that we're aware of. And again, those cases continue to be linked. We've also had up in Mildura, up in our northwest, we've had 18 cases today, making a total of 55 active cases up in Sunraysia. And it's been a really busy couple of days. Obviously, we thank the support of the community across Mildura, and we obviously put it into lockdown late on Friday night. But we've seen an extraordinary response over the last couple of days. Over 1,000 people got tested yesterday across a number of different testing locations across Mildura, and again we've seen a really strong community response. We'll continue to, of course, work with the community across Mildura to get to the bottom of those cases. The ones we've seen in the last 24 hours appear to be very closely linked to a number of known households and movements, but there's also some cross-border issues into communities moving into New South Wales. Of course, testing numbers continue to be very high, and with over 74,000 today, we continue to see the overwhelming majority of results come back the next day. Those positive case results can sometimes take a couple of hours longer to come back, given the additional process we have in place, the additional checks we do on positive cases to make sure we get those valid returns back to people as quickly as possible. From a contact tracing point of view, over 99% of those new contacts of new cases are contacted and followed up within 24 hours, so we're well ahead of our national benchmarks at 99.3%, and we're seeing a very strong response in general from people in terms of that initial case triage, using our SMS systems and that early information to help us guide the overall response. I'm pleased to confirm that over the last few days we've cleared 19,628 primary close contacts. So again, that consistent process both at the front end as well at the back end. We still have 46,759 people currently isolating as primary close contacts, and my thanks to everybody who continues in the midst of all this, whether you're a positive case or a primary close contact, to do that really hard job of isolating stringently and minimising the onward spread of transmission into the wider community. As the Premier and Ministers have talked about, it's really the focus is so much now on the vaccination programme, and we're really starting to get into our stride on second dose vaccinations. In fact, over 3/4 of the doses we're doing into state clinics are now second dose vaccinations, and it's been great to see. I was at Sandown the other day. It's been great to see the number of people coming forward from across the community to both get their first doses and to get their second doses done. We continue to have good capacity for both first dose and second doses, and keen to keep our vaccinators very busy over this point in time. I'd really like to do a shout out for our pharmacists again. We've now done over 100,000 doses of Moderna through our community pharmacy network and through some of the state clinics. But the community pharmacies, almost 700 of them across Victoria, those signs out on the street saying you can get your vaccination here, they continue to be a really important part of our armoury in getting vaccination into and across the wider community. So if you haven't been to your GP yet, if you've not been to a state clinic yet, then please go to one of our community pharmacists to start your vaccination journey as we get into these critical few weeks to get to our thresholds of 70% double dose and 80% double dose. Today is the last day of our Moderna walk-up, so you still have an opportunity today to walk up and get Moderna at 10 of our sites across Melbourne. They include our sites at Campbellfield, at the Dandenong Crown Plaza, at the Frankston Vaccination Hub, at Latrobe Uni, at Western Melton, up at the Plenty Ranges Convention Centre, at Sunshine Hospital, or Sandown Racecourse, or indeed the Royal Exhibition Building. Full details on our website, but please, if you haven't started your vaccination yet, Moderna is available to anybody. Please come forward and get it at one of our sites again to get these numbers up so we can all be fully protected from COVID. We also have, and with thanks again to our wonderful Auslan interpreters, we've got 3 vaccination clinics today across Melbourne where there'll be an in-person Auslan interpreter available for anybody who is hearing impaired and would like that additional bit of support. So at the Royal Exhibition Centre, or at Melbourne Showgrounds, or at the Convention Centre, you can walk up today and receive the support of an Auslan in-person interpreter right there. Again, full details on our website. Last two things from me. We're seeing an increasing number of local government areas now get towards that 90% threshold, and in fact 39 out of 79 LGA areas are now at beyond 90% first dose vaccination. We've ticked over a few more that have come into that 90% plus club, including Bawshire, Benalla, City of Greater Bendigo, Mansfield, Strathbogie, Northern Grampians, and indeed the Mornington Peninsula. And my congratulations to those communities for getting on with that vaccination, getting us well beyond not only 86%, but in fact 90%. Also, big shout out to Wyndham that continues to set the pace at 92.5% first dose vaccination. Again, that phenomenal uptake we've seen across that community. But also Casey and Hume that are well ahead of the Victorian average in terms of their vaccination rates. And then finally from me, I'm pleased to say that over 70s have now 94% first dose vaccinated, and the over 60s 92% first dose vaccinated. So we continue, our senior Victorians continue to set new standards and new thresholds for getting vaccination into so many people. And the younger folk, 16 to 17 year olds, are now 80% first dose vaccinated, and 12 to 15 year olds 63% first dose vaccinated. Again, those rates continue to rise very steeply. And for all Victorians aged over 70, all Victorians aged over 40, at least 70 to 80% of us have now had our second dose. So we're really seeing a very high uptake in those older cohorts, so a critical few weeks ahead. There are, as I speak today, 50,000 first dose appointments available across our state clinics in the next 7 days, and 12,000 second dose appointments available in our clinics for the next 7 days. So if you're not booked in yet, please make sure you get it done so we can use these next few weeks to best effect. With that, I'll hand back to the Premier for questions.
Thanks, Jerome. Happy to take any questions you have.
Are you confident we can get to the 80% double dose to hold Stakes and Oak Stake?
Yeah, we are. We can't be certain, obviously. It's just on the other side of what the roadmap predicts, but I think that we're very well placed to be able to achieve 80% double dose for those last two race meetings of the Melbourne Cup Carnival.
And if we hit 80% before Derby Day, is there a potential that Derby Day can host crowds?
Yeah, I think that we're not going to achieve it. It'd be great to say that was a chance. I think that the notion that we could hit 70 and 80 so close together, all the evidence is that we won't, and that's a shame, because that's often regarded as one of perhaps the best days racing of the carnival. But I would defer to experts when it came to those sorts of assessments. But yeah.
And just to confirm, when we say up to 10,000, does that include those that are there to actually make the racing happen, trainers, jockeys, that sort of thing?
I'm going to ask the Minister for not just major events but racing to talk about the way the whole event will work, if you like.
Look, I haven't seen the show determination, but my understanding is it's 10,000 patrons.
So the fans themselves.
I beg your pardon?
It'll be 10,000 fans themselves rather, and,
Ten- yeah,
and everyone
ten-
else is on top of that.
Yeah, that's my understanding, but we can get that confirmed.
How do people prove their vaccination status? Do they have to prove it as they're purchasing the tickets or at the gates? How will all of that work?
We've got a bit of time to sort that out. The VRC will obviously prioritise their members in terms of those that are able to attend. And I should make the point that for the vaccinated economy trial, because we're still, if we are still in the 70% phase, then the 25k radius will be in effect. I think the VRC will be able to establish the status of their members in terms of vaccination status when they're determining which of their many more than that get the opportunity to purchase tickets, but then there'll also be the technology that Minister Pearson has described that will be able to be displayed upon entry. So there'll probably be a combination of some demonstration at the time of purchase and demonstration at the time of entry.
Just to clarify, so if we are still at 70% double dose for Melbourne Cup Day, the patrons who are able to visit will need to be within 25 kilometres of...
Yeah, that's so during phase B, there's still a 25 kilometre limit. I know this because I checked my own distance from the racetrack when I heard about that. I think I'm 23 kilometres from Flemington. But the fact is the VRC has tens of thousands of members. Many more than 10,000 live within that radius.
It might be a question for the VRC, but how are you going to decide who gets through the gates?
You're spot on. It's a question for the VRC. Look, they'll have a process, I suspect, where they will they'll probably give some members an opportunity on Cup Day, some an opportunity on Oaks Day, some an opportunity on Stakes Day, and this is not particularly different from the situation at the Boxing Day test last year, where I think there was a 30,000 limit. And that meant that not all MCC members, for instance, were able to get in on day one, but they gave some an opportunity to come day 2, day 3 and thereafter. It's one of the consequences of being in a pandemic, and it's why the VRC have been providing some membership relief, fee relief for their members, because they haven't been able to offer them the full suite of membership services that they would normally get.
And how did you come to the decision of, or how did the show come to the decision of 10,000 people? We know they'd asked for 11.5.
Look, my understanding is the Public Health Advisory Panel had a look at the COVID Safe Plan. As you rightly identified, they'd asked for 11,500, and what came back was 10,000. I suspect it's probably in part a consequence of the fact that there are 3 race days in a 5-day period. So you have to contemplate the cumulative effect of 10,000, 10,000, 10,000 over a 3-day period, over a 5-day period, sorry. And as has been the case with many determinations and recommendations by the Public Health Panel, they make their assessment based on vaccination rates, based on case numbers, based on the details of the plan, how people are going to be separated. So, for instance, there's going to be a pretty hard zone between patrons and participants, and that's really important for the security of the industry. We don't want to see any of the participants catching this thing, because it can put the rest of the carnival at risk. So, look, the Public Health Panel, of which I'm not a member, makes their determination based on all kinds of different inputs and different sets of data. And I think what's important to focus on is that the Melbourne Cup is one of those handful of events that Melbourne has that showcases us to the nation and to the world. It's watched all over, particularly all over Europe, but it's watched in North America as well. And there's very few ways that we can better demonstrate a bounce back and the fact that we're opening up than to show not just the race, but people enjoying themselves at that race.
Do you have any other details on the event or the concert that's going to be held at the Sydney Live Music Hall?
No, look, those details are still to come. But as the Premier indicated, there'll be thousands of people. It's on October 30, so or as I call it, Derby Day, and I think both the lineup and the exact numbers of patrons are still to be sorted, both through discussions with the industry and then through the Public Health Panel.
Is it going to be something that's set up as a sign of us being out of lockdown, though? Is it a charity event or something like that to celebrate the end of this situation?
I don't know if it's going to be themed in that way. I think what it is, it's designed to do a few things. It's designed to, first of all, test our systems so that we can know that we can safely put on events with thousands of people. I think it's also there to show the live music industry, which has really struggled as much as any sector of the economy over the last 18 months, that we are there for them and that we are determined to maintain our reputation as a live music centre in this nation. We have some of the best acts, we have some of the great venues. Danny can speak about that in much better detail than I can, but it's an incredibly important part of our overall offering, and having a live music event is one of the centrepieces of our vaccination trials. In that 70 to 80% zone is an incredibly important thing to do and an incredibly important signal to send.
Can you say which promoters might be involved in putting that together?
I cannot at this stage, no.
Minister, last year you copped a bit of criticism when you announced that you were trying to reopen the racing industry. Were there any fears with this year with that sort of thing, or do you feel like the climate has changed?
I think there are a number of differences. If you recall, last year it wasn't actually about patrons, it was about owners going 500 to 1,000 owners at the Cox Plate, and I put my hand up at the time to say that was, I think, a misreading of the mood of the public given what everyone had been through. I think things are quite different now. This is, it's a vaccinated economy trial. It's actually a very important thing for us to do. But secondly, this pandemic has now been running for over 18 months, and I think that there is a powerful emotion and urge in the community for us to get open and to demonstrate to the world and to Australia that that's what's occurring. I had a call from, I won't name him, I had a call from a minister in another state government about a month ago who said to me, for God's sake, you guys, get the Cup happening. We all need this. It's not just about us. This whole nation's been through something incredibly, profound and unsettling. And whether it's the Melbourne Cup, the Australian Open, great live music events, the Formula One next year, all of those things I think are a very powerful signal that we are bouncing back. And it's, I think it's really important. So yes, of course, there will be people who don't like racing. There will be people who, there are people who probably don't like the Cup, and that's fine. But I think it is a really important signal to send to the nation and to the world that Melbourne is opening up.
What would you say to the businesses then at the same time that will still be running under fairly stringent caps, well under their capacity, and still sort of struggling, I suppose, to get through what the restrictions will be in place at the same time as this?
Well, what I'd say is this. We're doing some regional vaccination trials this week, starting this week, where some businesses, because they're participating in the trials, will have different capacity limits to the businesses who are not. By the time we get to the Cup, hospitality, for instance, will be open, but it will be open at, as you say, a much lower level than normal. But it's also true to say that the Cup will be running at a much, much lesser capacity than it would normally, as well. Up to 10,000 for an event that would normally bring between 85 and 105,000. So it's not as if it's back to normal either. It's there to test our systems and to demonstrate that we are starting to move down the road to opening up, and I think it's a wonderful thing for our city and our state to do that.
Just on the 25 kilometre limit, will there be any wiggle room for racing punters who want to go but live further away?
For who, sorry?
For racing fans that want to go to the Cup but live further away.
Look, I think it is important that we continue to have in place those public health settings that are being that are there for very good reasons, and as I indicated before, there will be many more than 10,000 VRC members and others who live within that limit. That won't be in application once we hit phase C. It might be that you miss out on Cup Day, but you can get to Oaks Day or Stakes Day.
Right, but do you think that's fair for those dedicated racing fans?
Well,
gurning to go to the Cup for the last couple of years?
Well, can I say there will be, by definition, if you've got a 10,000 limit for an event that would normally hold 100,000, there'll probably be 90,000 people who would love to get to the Cup who won't. We would like nothing more. I'd like nothing more than to have a Melbourne Cup with 100,000 people there, but that's not going to happen in 2021. Hopefully it happens in 2022.
Will you be going to the Cup?
I would like to, yeah. We'll wait and see.
Just on the vaccination passport trial, sorry, we've heard from some local councils, particularly in those areas where the trial has been running, that there hasn't been a lot of communication with the government, and a bit of a breakdown in comms essentially?
Well, I'm not sure what that would refer to. I mean, we've been talking to, there was a process to select the LGAs, and then there was a process through peak bodies and others to select the individual businesses. Those businesses have been in constant dialogue with DJPR and but also with the Department of Health. So, if there's specific concerns from a local council, I'd be more than happy to take that up, but I'm not aware of what those concerns are specifically.
This might be for Minister Pearson, but given the vaccination passport will be linked to Service Victoria, does this mean that if you're travelling interstate, that you will need to download the app, for example, of the other state when you're checking in?
I might get Danny to handle that.
Can I ask just one more on the racing trials? So will you fund these Melbourne Cup to go ahead? How much funding is the state government putting into the trials and to the events themselves?
Look, we've made no decision about putting funds in. I think Racing Victoria has been talking to all of the metro clubs in 2021 in the same way that they did in 2020 to help support them through a long period of no gate takings. RV is also talking to the VRC about what support might be provided given the infrastructure that they'll need to set up, but there's been no specific discussion with the government about the government supporting that. It might be that at some point Racing Victoria knocks on my door. They do that pretty regularly, but that hasn't happened yet.
So in answer to your question, Samaya, you will be required to download other jurisdictions' apps if you're in those jurisdictions. So, for example, if you were to go to Sydney, you would need to download the Service New South Wales app and go through a comparable process to enable you to transfer your vaccination certificate across to your Service New South Wales app. We are having conversations about how we can look at increasing the level of interoperability between Service Victoria and Service New South Wales. Ideally, what you would have ultimately would be that you would use the Service Victoria app, and if you were travelling to Sydney or Brisbane or Hobart, you could just use that one app and you'd have that level of interoperability. Those conversations, that work is ongoing, but the key priority at the moment is to look at getting the technology right for Victoria so that we can start to open up our economy in a safe and progressive way.
And this might not be something that you know of, given other states and territories are probably doing their own thing, but it sounds like the Victorian, New South Wales and Commonwealth governments have been working a lot closer on this particular version. Do you know what the case is for other states and how Victorians who go to those other states might be able to prove their vaccination status? Have you been having those conversations as well?
Look, the focus at this stage has been working closely with New South Wales and the Commonwealth because there's a clear urgency at our end to get this sorted and get this right. And look, it is quite involved and it's quite complicated. The Australian Immunisation Register, as I understand it, is basically like a 1990s era mainframe computer, and you've got to try and find ways where you can incorporate that data, that record, onto your Service Victoria app. And initially we thought that, for example, you could have a simple API developed, an application programming interface that would seamlessly connect the Service Victoria app to the air. The problem with that became apparent was that it's very difficult for the air to distinguish, John Smith, all the John Smiths or all the Jane Smiths that have their vaccination certificate with their individual Service Victoria account. So that's why we've gone down this path, and we're working closely with New South Wales in relation to sort of sharing those knowledge and share that understanding at an officer to officer level. The digital and data ministers meeting meets on a regular basis. So we're very much focused on getting our technology right. I think that once we get the technology landed, that solution deployed and developed, then over the coming weeks we can then start to think about what that might look like in terms of other jurisdictions.
What about the people who don't have a smartphone?
Yeah, so we estimate that 2% of Victorians don't have a smartphone. So for those people, they are able to contact Services Australia and get a hard copy certificate. So I think the number is 1800 653 809 is the Services Australia hotline, and they'll be able to assist people in terms of getting that hard copy version.
And logistics-wise, so you walk up to the pub there's a QR code, you go to check in, and both things come up at once. Can you just talk us
Correct.
through exactly what it
Yeah.
looks like?
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is we want to maximise the user experience. We want to make it easy for consumers, and we want to make it easy for citizens, I should say, and for businesses. So you're incorporating the vaccination certificate onto the Service Victoria app. So effectively, you'll QR code in. You'll have one tick to show that you've checked in. You'll have another tick to show that you've been vaccinated, and there's a hologram that's been inserted on the certificate to prevent fraudulent behaviour. So you're able to move your phone around, and people on the doors will be able to confirm that yes, that's a valid certificate, and yes, the person has checked in.
And that's the plan that we're talking pubs, shops, hairdressers, they have someone on the door checking that, or someone within the business that has to look at that for every person.
Well, I think what we're starting to do now is with the trials. This is what we're doing. We're trialling this in terms of making sure that we've got the technology right, and it's making sure that people do the right thing. And I think that over the coming weeks we'll have learnings about the way in which we apply the technology. But this is about using technology to get us back the freedoms that we crave for and that we've missed so much. And it's cutting edge 21st century technology that will give us all the confidence to be able to go back and do the things that we love most.
Does it have a sunset clause? Presumably we won't still be doing this in 10 years' time.
Well, I mean, I would dearly love that this could be the obsolete technology within 3 months, because we know we don't need it. Look, we don't know. I mean, I think that's just the reality of the situation. What we want to do now, we're really focused on making sure that we can give people the confidence to go back out and enjoy their liberties and their freedoms. We want retailers trading before Christmas. We want this to be a summer like no other. We want to have some fantastic live music events at the Bowl and right around regional Victoria, so people can celebrate this great state, this creative state, and enjoy themselves. So that's our real focus at the moment. We want to get the technology right. We want to give people confidence that they can use this technology, and it's easy to use, it's simple to use, and they can reclaim their freedoms and their liberties.
How will businesses be supported with this? We've obviously seen those who are anti-vaccination target different businesses, hold protests in the middle of the city. Dare say these people who are conducting these trials could be subjected to that too. Is there support measures and I suppose a plan in place to support those businesses both in the trials and ongoing?
Yeah, I think that might be more of a question for the Premier. So
there's case managers from the jobs department that'll work with each of those 15 businesses. They'll then work on probably a larger scale when it comes to things like live music at the Bowl or the Spring Racing Carnival, Melbourne Cup Carnival events, I should say. And if anyone is breaking the law, if anyone's being violent, if anyone's being, acting in that fundamentally awful way, then Victoria Police will be there. So, these trials are for those who have got vaccinated, and I just say to anybody who's not vaccinated, well, please don't interfere in trials to open our whole state up. That doesn't make any sense. Makes no sense at all. I would just say on burdens for business and on all these sorts of issues, they're not unimportant issues, but I think it's just important to pause for a moment and just reflect on the fact that if you own a pub, for instance, to use your example from earlier, then they already keep people who are under a certain age out. They don't serve alcohol to people who've had too much to drink. There's a whole range of rules in relation to gaming rooms, for instance. So they're very heavily regulated environments now. And the other thing is, for a period of time, people are going to be counting how many people are in the venue, because there will be caps. So it is already, COVID and not COVID, a pretty heavily regulated environment. This is an extra layer, but it's an extra layer that means that patrons can attend with absolute confidence that they're not sitting beside people who haven't had the jab. And I think a lot of people will want that. A lot of people will want the reassurance of knowing that the people serving them and the people they're mingling with have done everything they can to keep themselves and all of us safe. That's the feedback I get.
And how long do you envisage that being the case?
Well, it's very difficult to know. And I think the 10-year issue, yes, I think we're all hopeful on that time frame. Look, hopefully it's not needed once we get, further into the new year. I can't put a date on it. If I could, then of course we would. But it's all about how much spread has there been in the community, not so much how many case numbers are there, but how many people are finishing up in hospital and what sort of pressure does that put on our hospital. And that's not just for a short, intense period. There may be waves, so multiple peaks, if you like, as we get to different phases of that summer. But people should assume that it's absolutely there for the summer, and it might be there for a little bit longer. Hopefully not. Hopefully we don't need it once we get out, well and truly into 2022.
New South Wales Premier Perrottet, he says that international borders could potentially open by November 1 or from November 1.
Yep.
Is that your belief and your understanding?
I wouldn't. He may have a more recent discussion with the PM than me, but I don't have a date. I'd leave it for the federal government to announce that. But I had a very good conversation with Dom yesterday about a whole range of issues about health funding and the fact that whilst we've got, I see a bit of commentary this morning in the papers and on the TV about how much amazing work the Commonwealth Government has done for us, and we're very grateful for the partnership. But let's be really clear about this. Over the next few months, there'll be no caps on the number of patients who present to Victorian hospitals needing critical care. No caps. So the notion that any government can cap their funding is not right. And just because you've done a lot doesn't mean you're exempt from doing more. That's the nature of government in a global pandemic. So we'll have some positive discussions, I'm sure, with the PM and the federal government. As I said, there's no sense of criticism here. We're very grateful for what the partnership we've had. But unfortunately, we don't just get to call time on that and say, oh, well, there's a 6.5% cap on growth in this funding deal, and it's only about COVID patients, when what we know is that the care and support of a lot of non-COVID patients has had to be interrupted. So we had a good chat about that. Talked about GST issues, and we also talked about getting our border open as fast as we possibly can. So it was a very, very positive discussion, and we'll have more to say on all those matters, and probably more still soon.
And in terms of what you exactly need from the feds, have you given them a plan, or
in terms of health funding?
Health funding.
Oh, and well, I think it all
What
starts
do you
with an
exactly
acknowledgement
need?
that because the patients, because the need isn't capped, the funding can't be capped either. So once we get that acknowledgement, then maybe we can have some further discussions. Again, I wouldn't want you to write this up as a tiff or an argument. You can have differences. You can have a debate and a discussion. We're all adults, so it's not blame or turf wars or fights or arguments. It's just we have, and not when I say we, all health ministers on behalf of all states and territories have signed a letter. So there is some unity here, but we'll just work through those issues, and it's a very compelling case.
In your view, though, do you think the federal government has let down, Australians during the pandemic? You were highly critical of them, I guess, not having purpose-built quarantine facilities. There's been argy-bargy over the vaccination rollout, the procurement, etc. Do you think there's been a letdown?
No, I'm not here to be highly critical of anyone. And I don't know that you could describe. I from time to time have made some comments. I wouldn't say I was highly critical. Others may see it differently. I don't know. I could go to another gear. I haven't. Like, seriously, these are very important matters, and part of my job is to stand up for our state, not quarrel for its own sake. And that's not what I'm doing today. I'm just simply telling you what I spoke to the newly elected Premier of New South Wales, and Victoria and New South Wales find ourselves in very, very similar circumstances. Although he did make the point to me that we will get the benefit of being able to watch and see what happens in Sydney and what happens in New South Wales once they open up, because they've got more vaccines and they're a few weeks ahead of us. But look, I wouldn't be doing my job, and neither would Dominic, if we didn't have views on things like hospital funding. I wish that consequences from COVID, there weren't any. I wish that all the deferred care issues we've had to deal with weren't a thing. And I wish that I could put a cap on the number of patients who are going to present that are going to be really, really sick. And the fact of the matter is I can't do that. So if you can't cap the need, you can't cap the funding. Otherwise, you just get really, really bad outcomes. You've got to ration even further. So I'm not proposing to resolve this from the podium here today, but that'll be things that we'll continue to talk about, and I think it'll be all the states talking to the Commonwealth Government with one voice.
Do you have any updated projections on what date we will hit 70 and 80% fully vaccinated?
No, I don't have a definitive prediction, but the trend tells you, and there's all sorts of experts online and others, and we're very grateful to them who track these things and are braver than us in some ways, where they try and be as definitive as they can. We are a chance to be ahead of the 26th. That'll be a fantastic problem for us to be there a little bit early, but 26 is looking very, very solid. That's what the roadmap talks about, and then it's only a handful of days, like the 4th, 5th round, that whatever I can't recall whichever the date is in November, the 4th or 5th, I think. 5th, yeah, sorry, 5th, yes. Yes. So if you look at it as an interval, only a few days after we hit 70, we will hit 80, so it moves around a little bit. But look, I think we can be confident that provided everyone keeps going and getting their second doses and bringing those forward, provided people keep going getting their first doses, then we can be confident that we're going to hit those targets.
There are reports about a GP with long lines out the front handing out exemptions for people who don't want to get the vaccine. Do you have an update on that investigation and what we're doing to make sure that those exemptions aren't handed out freely?
A couple of points. Firstly, obviously, CHO directions made under the Health Act, Public Health and Wellbeing Act, are a matter for us, but the conduct of GPs is a matter for others. It's a matter for the Commonwealth. So I'm sure that we're working with the Commonwealth to try and get to the bottom of what's going on there. Our GPs have done an amazing job all the way through this, together with our hospital doctors and the whole team. You've heard me talk about nurses and ambos and cooks and cleaners and ward clerks. The whole team have done an amazing job, but we shouldn't forget primary care, and I think the actions or the alleged actions of one or even a small number of GPs shouldn't detract from the amazing work that our GPs are doing. So that's very much a live matter, principally one for the Commonwealth, but we'll have to wait and see what they find, and if they establish that things have happened, then there might be consequences from a state point of view as well.
Do you get reports on how many people have exemptions so far?
No, but that might be something that the Commonwealth Government is keeping some record of, and given the issues, what may be occurring, again giving the person the benefit of the doubt at this stage, that might be something that needs to be tracked as best you can track it. But I think at some point in time there'll be, via the AIR data, so that National Immunisation Registry, there'll be an ability to aggregate that and have a state-by-state picture, I assume.
And in the last couple of days we've seen some police saying they're anti-mandate when it comes to vaccines, and perhaps some AMBOs as well.
Sure.
What do you say to people in those professions that are anti-mandate?
Well, firstly, I thank them for the work that they do every single day. One of the great honours of this job is to meet people who work in our emergency services, and those who provide care and support, those who run toward the danger. When everything in your being tells you to run the other way, they're exceptional people. And whether it's out visiting suburban police stations or doing shifts, as I have done with AMBOs late at night in the city and the suburbs, they are exceptional people. But these are equally exceptional times, and we need to get as many people vaccinated as we possibly can, particularly those who, because of the work they're doing, are at greater risk of getting it, and if you've got it, then you're at greater risk of giving it. And we need to make sure that we've got as many people in the community vaccinated as possible. So they're not easy decisions, and they're not decisions that are made lightly. So people will have different views, but we've had for a while now a vaccination mandate in aged care. We've both public and private. We were very clear that anyone who was not first dose jabbed by the deadline, 17 September, I think, from memory, in our public aged care, and we've got about 5,000 beds, more than any other state, they would not be on shift. We would not roster them to work with aged care residents. So there's some difficult decisions to be made here, but they're incredibly important, and keeping people safe is what drives all of them.
We're almost 2 years into the pandemic. The state of emergency...
It feels longer.
Yes, it does, absolutely. The
Feels
state of
longer.
emergency, which...
For everyone, I'm not pleading anything special. It feels longer for all of us. State of emergency
State of emergency legislation,
Yep.
which obviously ultimately gives the Chief Health Officer with the power to make legally binding directions,
Yes.
expires at the end of this year. Your government's drawing up pandemic-specific laws. I guess, what's your view on ultimately giving those public health order powers, as is the case for any other ministerial decision under the Westminster system, to the Health Minister?
Yeah, they are unique in that they sit with the Chief Health Officer. What I'd say is that I don't have any announcements to make today about that bill and that process, and we'll have to go through a process of negotiation as we always do. But if you've asked me a kind of thematic question, Samaya, so if I could answer in those terms, we are looking at what happens in other Australian states. We're looking at what happens in New Zealand, and we're also, I think, entering a phase. Once you've vaccinated anyone who wants to get vaccinated and who you can encourage through sales, marketing and mandate to get the jab, then you're in a different phase. All of us have done everything we can to protect the health system by that point. So then they're not just health decisions, they're not just health orders. They are health orders, they're economic orders, they're social orders, they are a set of rules and a plan and a roadmap that is much broader. And it would be, I think, in many ways unfair to ask someone who is an outstanding public health expert to have to balance all those things when you're in, not post-pandemic, but you're in post 80%, 85%, maybe even 90% double dose. There becomes, and it's a good problem to have, that there are many considerations, not as when you're in the heat of it, and you don't have people vaccinated, so you've got a smaller number of considerations. It's a broader picture, I think a broader view that you have to have. So we're looking at what other states do, we're looking at what New Zealand does, and we'll have a bill there, and we'll be able to speak more freely and in more detail about that, and no doubt that'll be out for everybody to look at.
So continuing on with that thematic question, with
Yes.
maybe a bit more of a definitive answer, you would support the view for ministers to have that ultimate decision-making power once we get to sort of like after December.
I think I've given you a sense of some of the issues that we're dealing with, and when we've got a bill to show everybody, then we will do that. And there's a cabinet process, and out of respect for that process, I won't go any further, as thematic as I've been.
Can we ask maybe Jerome some questions? Down for about 36 hours.
Yep.
But there's no exposure site. It's listed on the Victorian on the website.
Yes.
Do you know why?
It may well be one for Jerome.
Okay. And also, I think I know your answer to this, but IBAC is starting public hearings next week. Have
Yep.
you been called as witness?
If you want to know who's been called to any of IBAC's hearings, then you should speak to IBAC. In terms of the matters, I think they're canvassing this week. You're all free to ask me as many times and as many questions as you want, but I'll just, if I can kind of put a stake in the ground today, I don't intend to run a commentary on it. I referred it to IBAC, so the notion of me running these investigations with your assistance, while I've actually asked IBAC to do the work for us all, that wouldn't make any sense to me. So I'm not going to be providing a commentary on that. But they've got resources, they've got powers, and they've got a reference from me. My signature is on the letter. I've asked them to go and do this. Where I had a role to play more directly, I was as leader of my party, and we have made very significant changes, very significant reform. Not to say that journey's over, but I'll leave it to the State Secretary and others to comment on that. But it wouldn't make much sense for me to be running an inquiry jointly with you guys while IBAC were doing that very same work. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Are you prepared to stand down MPs who've been implicated in the inquiry and where there is strong evidence to suggest that they are guilty of potential breaching of guidelines?
I think we should just wait and see what's led. We should wait and see what comes of it. I was asked a question the other day, and I said that not as a matter of course. These things are not binary like that. But let's just wait and see how things unfold.
Your fines from Victoria Police, have you received them and have they been paid?
I received them on Friday, and I paid them moments later. And that was one burden for me to shoulder. The grief I got from Kath and the kids was considerably more. I had it on in the car, I took it off. I don't know why I took it off. I walked up. I did the wrong thing. I've paid that fine, and it is important that we all follow the rules, because the rules are there to keep us safe. And $400 is $400, but I got, in monetary terms, I don't know how you'd put a monetary value on it, but I got many thousands of dollars of grief from my teenage children, and a little bit from Kath too. We've all got to follow these rules. Just for a couple more weeks, and then we can be free. But the most important thing to do over the next couple of weeks, go and get vaccinated. There are thousands of appointments, thousands of them. and they'll keep you safe. It's only less than 1 in 10, and on some days 1 in 20 of our people in hospital really sick have had 2 doses. So it works. It's safe, it's effective, and if you get it, then you'll be keeping yourself safe. That's a good outcome for you and for your loved ones, and it'll also be making the job of our nurses, no harder than it needs to be.
The Chief Health Officer said the other day that we were looking like we're getting much closer to the peak here. We've seen a slight
I did
drop
see those
today.
comments, yes.
Yeah, slight drop, not much from yesterday,
No.
but what are the numbers telling you? Are we still on an upward trajectory here?
Oh, look, we would hope that, just as the Chief Health Officer hopes, that the data, there's some signs there, whether it be ref rate, whether it be some tapering off in the hottest of those local government areas, and as the double dose vaccination rate increases. That was certainly the experience in New South Wales and in Sydney. Only time will tell definitively, but we hopefully we can have a more narrative discussion with you guys a bit later in the week. We've got some updated burnout modelling coming to us, and again, ministers need to go through that first, and then there might be an opportunity for the Chief Health Officer or one of his acting deputies to take you through some of that, whether that's on the record like this, or whether it's a briefing for you, whatever would be of greatest benefit.
Can I ask Jerome about some delays?
Absolutely. No more for me?
Just one more.
Sure.
Just with the health orders, so if they were to move back to the minister, does that sort of undermine essentially, throughout the pandemic we've been hearing, we've listened to the advice of the health experts. Does that sort of undermine the messaging?
No. I'm not confirming that that's the model that we're going to go through, but you can, if you work it backwards, as you move to a vaccinated community, a vaccinated economy, you talk about early next year, for instance, where we have literally done everything we can to get as many people vaccinated as possible, and the only people who won't be vaccinated will be people who I think have made the wrong choice. They've made a choice not to protect themselves, but that'll be a reality that we have to deal with. Once you get to that point, health advice is important, absolutely, but the field becomes much broader. There are many more issues for us to deal with. And that's not to say that issues of mental health, issues of economic damage, all of those issues haven't been part of Professor Sutton's considerations. Of course they have. But in terms of, and it's hard to rank things, but it is just a broader suite of issues, a broader set of important issues that have to be dealt with once you've done everything you can to vaccinate everybody and the place is open. That's the really important point here. And I think the point Samaya makes about the fact that ministers, usually hold these powers and moving into a different phase, I think they're points that are well made. But let's work through those things, and we'll have a bill that you'll be able to look at in detail. And there's no sense of criticism. In fact, it's a fantastic thing to be so close to being open, to being so close to getting back to normal, and having not the lead consideration, the protection of our health system, but instead the lead consideration being the growth of our economy, the health of our community in the broadest sense of that word, and getting back to normal. That's a fantastic set of challenges to have to face, and that'll be more than just a health advice issue. That means you've got to draw on lots of different perspectives, as we always have, whether it's in creating jobs, in building hospitals, schools, road, rail, investing in TAFE, investing in mental health, 3-year-old kinder, list goes on and on and on. That's the place. Removing level crossings, that's the place we want to get back to. No more for me. Excellent. Jerome, he's all set.
We're getting really high testing numbers, but is the system getting overwhelmed? We know of one family who was tested at the Port Melbourne Respiratory Clinic. 5 days later, they still haven't got results.
Okay.
And they've since been told that their referrals and the swabs have been lost. They've been told that by the Port Melbourne Respiratory Clinic and also by Melbourne Pathology. Is that happening more than once, or is this just an isolated incident?
That's the first I've heard of that one, and that's of real concern, so we're happy to take that one and see what's happened there. But look, I think what we're seeing at the moment is 74,000 or so test results today. We've seen over 70,000 for most of the last week. The vast majority of people coming forward and getting tested, which is a really important thing. 85-86% of results are coming back the next day. Now that's lower than where we've been traditionally over the last 12 months or so, but we're also seeing higher testing numbers. We have a couple of issues that are going on that we are focusing on. One is one of our path providers, Melbourne Path, has had a systems issue about a week ago, which they're still recovering from. So we know there's been some delayed tests in the system. But I'm talking about delays for a few hours, not for multiple days. And I would never expect any test results to take more than 2 days. You know, we've got 99.8% of results coming back within 48 hours. So that number's remaining very strong. We do know that positive test results take a little bit longer through those additional validation steps we take them through, so that sometimes pushes the result numbers out by 3 or 4 hours on those results. And particularly for regional cases, a lot of focus now in Mildura. When we have long distance regional cases and where there's a lot of courier time involved, again, some of those local results can take longer. But the example you give is very concerning, and I'd love to have a look at that. Hang on, at the back, we'll go to Mildura first.
Yeah, 18 cases today, 55 active cases, but no tier 1 exposure sites listed. What's going on? Yeah, so look, the Mildura exposure is, and the Mildura dynamics are, we have a number of households that are now well known and understood, and we're getting a lot of cooperation from the communities involved in those households. And we are now increasingly focusing on tier 1 sites. We've had this conversation from this podium over the last week or so. So increasingly we're focusing on tier 1 sites. We accept the fact that tier 2 sites are not as productive as in terms of finding positive cases, and we can't keep listing thousands of tier 2 sites when we have as many positive cases as we do, because it just starts to close down the rest of our economy. So you won't expect to see very many tier 2 sites in Mildura or in fact anywhere else. The focus on that particular outbreak is within a specific set of households, well understood dynamics, and we'll work it on that way.
All right, but say that the whole area is in lockdown, right?
Yep.
So is it just confined to like a handful of houses, or?
No, it's confined to a particular set of communities that we're working with, a particular number of households that we're working with in that area. Now we have asked, and we worked through closely with health services and local stakeholders. There was a very strong desire to make sure that we identified any other potential cases that we've seen in Mildura. The testing response we've seen over the last 2 days, I think, highlights a desire, as we've seen previously in Mildura back in May when we had the previous outbreak, for the community to jump on top of this very quickly. I welcome that. It's great to see that response, and I'm confident we'll run it to ground. But you should not expect to see, as we move forward into a vaccinated economy, as we move through to 58% plus double dose vaccination levels, we will increasingly start to focus our outbreak efforts and our response effort to those areas where we think the most likelihood is that we're going to see COVID, rather than mass listing of tier 2. That was a really important approach months ago. It is not appropriate to the stage we're going into now.
And do we have any idea how the virus got to Mildura? Is that something that you're investigating? Or
we're continuing to investigate. Look, obviously, we think it's very close connected to some exposures in the New South Wales side of the border. So we've seen some movement in that border community, and that's where most of our investigations are going at this point in time.
And we saw how quickly the health system in Shepparton, for example, really came under a lot of pressure. Will Mildura-based public hospital be able to cope with COVID cases there in Mildura? Is there a potential for it to really come under significant strain?
Oh, look, I think if you look at the way that Terry and the team at Mildura-based hospital are doing a phenomenal job through this outbreak, as they did through previous ones. We have put some of our team up into Mildura over the weekend to provide additional support to the health service, and of course we run our health service on a regional basis. So Bendigo takes a significant role in supporting the wider Loddon Mallee area. So we have all those systems and supports in place. And again, if I go back to Shepparton, if you look at the Shepparton outbreak we're dealing with now, where we have 119, I think, active cases in the Shepparton area, very similar to the numbers we had back in August. But because we're taking a much tighter approach to how we're managing the outbreak, recognising that the vast majority of people in Shepparton are at least first dose vaccinated and second dose numbers are going well, it also reduces the negative impact on the other public services. So, Shepparton doesn't have the same pressure now in terms of its wider public services that it did in August, because we're taking a much more forensic approach to our outbreak management.
Just on the Mildura-based hospital, I've been told that 60 staff from the hospital have been told to go home and isolate because they've been exposed to COVID. Is the hospital going to be listed as a tier 1 site?
No, not at this point. So I don't have the numbers to hand in terms of the number of staff exposed at Mildura-based hospital. But again, we define tier 1 exposure sites when we have positive cases in the environment and people who we think are unprotected in that environment. Our health services now have exceptional experience of how we use tier 3 PPE and all the protocols around maintaining COVID safety. That's why we have, on the whole, a low number of health service staff who are COVID positive at this point in time, and that's how we also manage our health services through the challenges of COVID positive people in the community.
Sorry, sorry, we're at 58% fully
Yeah.
vaccinated at the moment. At this point in New South Wales outbreak, they started to see the curve bend essentially and numbers to come down. Do we have any idea when our numbers will begin to sort of come down?
Well, look, I'm not the Chief Health Officer and I don't have a crystal ball. I don't think Brett does either. So, look, we're all watching these numbers day by day. We're seeing some LGAs where we're seeing promising signs. I've indicated Hume. Hume has really taken a hammering on positive cases in recent weeks and months. That's now starting to look a little bit low, but that's a good result for a day. But look, we're going to be watching this very closely over the coming days. We'd all like this to be over. We'd all like to get to the turn. But it's our behaviours around the community that will determine whether those numbers start to turn. So if we stick with the rules, stick with those directions, do what we need to do, those numbers will still head into the right direction.
Just one last question on Mildura. So you said the cross-border issues with New South Wales. Do you know if the virus has come from New South Wales or if people in Mildura have taken the virus?
Oh, look, as I said, I don't have a detailed epidemiological or genomics answer to that question. Our understanding is there are some significant interplay between communities on both sides of the border. You know, where the initiation point was, I don't really know, but also increasingly that's not really that relevant. You know, we've got 18,000 positive cases in Victoria as a whole. Our focus now is how do we get people vaccinated, how do we slow down the rate of transmission so we can all move on and get to a better place.
Are you looking ahead to capacity and supply and logistics and that sort of thing at state-run hubs to give Pfizer to under 12-year-olds between 5 and 11 before the end of this year?
Yeah, obviously it's a decision for Otago and for the Commonwealth Government around the rules around under 12-year-olds. I think as we've shown with the very rapid response of 12 to 15-year-olds, our state hubs are up and ready to vaccinate whoever is eligible to get vaccinated. They've had a phenomenal record. We've done just about half of all the vaccinations in the state through our state hubs. We'll continue to make that available. We just want to get as many people vaccinated as we possibly can, particularly in these precious few weeks ahead as we look towards our 70 and 80% double dose timelines.
You touched on it earlier, Mount Borbor, you're looking into gatherings there.
Yeah.
Were they illegal gatherings held at the end of the season?
Yep.
How many people were involved in those gatherings?
I don't have those numbers to hand, but I've got 18 positive cases, and I've said many times before, getting COVID is a pretty bad thing to get, and that's not where you want to be after an illegal gathering.
Are those people looking at fines, or have they been fined?
They're looking at COVID.
Are they football gatherings?
Sorry?
Gatherings?
Oh, look, I wasn't there. I don't know what they would do, but there were some grand final gatherings in Borbor and associated with a number of venues.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thank you.